welcome back to another episode of Just
Just
a
a
Squirrel
squirrel
Looking
looking
for a
for a
Nut,
nut,
trying
trying
to
to
get
get
out of
out of
this
this
rut.
rut. We really have gotten out of the rut.
Yeah, we have.
I'm
We
really
have
proud
learned
of
how to
that.
deal with the unknown, haven't we?
Yeah, we dealt with the unknown. We faced it. Now, this is that time of the month where someone else sometimes just appears
Yes.
out of the ether. I don't know where this. Oh,
Hello.
well, you're not unknown anymore.
Not unknown anymore. Thank y'all for having me again.
Please, you're one of the squirrels. We thank you. The whole world, you're part of the gang. Let me ask you this. How many folks in the audience, or either of you all, were ever afraid of haunted houses? As a matter of fact, how many of you were ever afraid when you were little kids to sleep under windows at night in your bedroom when it was dark outside? I saw this TV movie called Salem's Lot about vampires when I was a kid. And there was a scene where a little boy vampire floated up to his brother's window and was scratching away with, the window. And he was all ghostly looking. And the brother opened up the window. He didn't know what was coming. But what happened is his brother came in and bit him. And, I really didn't believe in vampires. Although I did think it would be kind of cool to live forever. But it reminded me that what's in the dark is unknown. And I was scared of it. I was scared of the forest behind my house. Was Bigfoot living there? I was scared of the crazy woman next door who I thought might be a witch. Was she going to cast a spell on me? I was afraid of 6th grade. I was especially afraid of 7th grade, because then I'd be going to middle school. I didn't know anyone. Would they accept me? Would they like me? Why are we afraid of the unknown? Are y'all even afraid of the unknown? Are you one of these people that are like, oh no, I embrace it. I love it. In other words, are you liars?
Well, the first part in regard to the bed, I don't think for me you were describing a childhood circumstance. I think you were describing last night. And
You are home alone, right?
Yeah.
I don't think they've got vampires in New York City. And I'm not afraid of little boy vampires anymore.
That's one thing that I know I personally haven't come to terms with ever since I was probably 5th or 6th grade, and I was able to have my own room that had a closet. There was always that thought that there was something in the closet that was going to come out at whatever portion of the night. Yeah, probably. And I kid you not, right now I've even noticed myself doing this in however many years, is every time I go to bed, I make sure that the door is closed. And the only reason why is because I feel like in knowing how I sleep, when someone opens the door, A, there's a high likelihood that I would be able to hear it. And B, it just gives me that additional time to be able to stand up and process and get into whatever action I need. And it's just, I don't know, it's become so habitual at this point where I kid you not, I would have a very, very difficult time falling asleep if the door is open, regardless of where I'm staying.
I will just say this, then I'll turn it over to Bodie. So thank you for your patience with me, Bodie. I live in a studio apartment. I'm not telling you people where, because what's out there is unknown. But I saw the original version of the movie that was the backstory of the characters in Silence of the Lambs. It's called Manhunter. And it's terrifying. There's this scene where there's this couple laying in their bedroom, and you see it from the perspective of the killer going into the house, right? He sneaks in and he goes up the stairs, and then there they are sleeping in their bed, and he opens the door and shines light on them, and you know what's going to happen next. And my bed is literally, you open the door and my bed is right there. And one of the things my husband is very particular about is making sure that door is locked. It's weird because you don't know what's on the other side. Yeah. And I always imagine, I've had dreams about this. I'm kind of hypervigilant this way. I mean, if someone were to open the door of our house, if I were to forget to lock the door, they would open the door of the house and there would be 2 people sleeping in the bed. I imagine I would fight. I'd go ballistic. and that berserk sort of crazy response is, to me, hypervigilance in response to the unknown. Jessica, it is good to see you. And we are talking about today fear of the unknown. Bodhi, you were going to say something, but I just had to open my mouth and add that little bit of terror.
No, I was gonna say now all of the listeners aren't gonna sleep good tonight. Now everybody's gonna have nightmares. Everybody's gonna be locking their doors, deadbolting. It's funny with me because I'm not really that unknown in the house. Like even now, like living in here is me and my dogs. I'm really not afraid of what goes on in the house. I'm the one that when I go running and I'm running down like a long path, a long road, and there's no signs of life anywhere around, I always start thinking like, what's in these woods? What's going to jump out of these woods right now? Yeah. And I think it stems back from like a personal experience, just like with, as y'all were mentioning, like movies, something we've seen before, something that's been stuck in our mind, is I think what causes us to kind of think that. But yeah, I'm always thinking like, oh, there's some wolf here in Alabama that's going to come running out of the woods and just tackle me, or some bear got loose. But yeah, that's mine is more when I'm out running and have music and I'm distracted and not focused. That's where the unknown kind of creeps into my head.
What would you do if like a bear or a wolf or something just suddenly popped out of the forest or out of the houses or whatever?
We only one of us is walking away, so whatever's in arm's reach. And it's probably going to be
the bear.
Yeah, put your money on the bear or the wolf. Yeah.
I'm always terrified of, especially when it comes to animals that are significantly bigger than myself. So I'll share with you an experience. I don't know if I shared this with either of you or Jessica or anyone else before, but when I went into the Grand Canyon, and it was the second time when we hiked it from rim to rim, the last 3 to 4 miles we were hiking at it was relatively late, like 7-8 o'clock, well past sunset. And one of the things that I found fascinating was that the entire day during that hike, when the sun was out, I didn't see many of the animals or much of the wildlife. So I didn't see rattlesnakes, I didn't see scorpions, I didn't see literally anything. And then once the sun set, I immediately came across rattlesnakes, scorpions, and then there was a couple that was right ahead of us. They were walking maybe half a mile to a mile ahead. They ran into a live ram. A ram in the dark. They ran into a live ram, and they started screaming. Meanwhile, the 4 of us are walking behind them. We have no idea what they were screaming about or anything. And so we just started to assume that maybe they just got into an argument, because we didn't really expect for them to encounter wildlife like that.
Why were they screaming about a ram? I've got to ask. Like, all the scary things in the world that are unknown, a ram?
Supposedly, when we spoke with them, what ended up happening was the ram blocked the path, and he or she they were about to charge at the couple.
Oh.
And so this is a ram that the rams there, at least in the canyon, are easily 150, 200 pounds, and that's all muscle. So if you got to think about if it charges at you, and I guess one of the things that I've learned is that they're very territorial creatures.
Oh.
So if they think that you're attacking or you're trying to take over their territory, obviously they're going to use their animal instincts and try to get the territory back. And so what ended up happening, talk about the unknown, was that the ram, I guess that the couple, supposedly one of the things you're supposed to do, at least this is what they did, is they got big, they made loud noise to try and scare it away. And the ram started to scale up the canyon, and part of the scaling included pushing down a bunch of rocks. So meanwhile, we're on the other end of that. We're walking and with our flashlights because we couldn't see the path, and all of a sudden we see these like boulders just drop right in front of us. So if one of them were to hit us, I mean,
yeah, you could die.
Instantly go unconscious.
Like an Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
Exactly. It truly was. I really wish there was like a film crew ready to cast, because the script was already written. But talk about the unknown, and that was one of the things. And I'm curious, kind of going back to how we started this conversation about, the monster in the room or the monster under the bed. I wonder how often are those stories are based on non-real life events that we've experienced, like movies we've seen. Yeah, I don't know if the two of you can relate to this, or if the two of you or Jessica or anyone else that's tuning in has ever seen this film, Friday the 13th.
Oh yeah,
Of course.
got some stuff.
I
right
love
there.
slashers.
I couldn't sleep for weeks after watching that because I thought Jason was going to walk through the door. Now, here's obviously not a real life event, but based on real life events, similar enough to like where I could picture myself being in a, cabin like that with my friends, and all of a sudden, like, all these things happen. And it's just interesting to me for how long can those things really haunt you?
So, my ex had some cousins that I would hang out with, and those were people, and we can talk a little bit about what I'm about to say next in more depth once I talk about how this haunting sort of thing. These were people that were very, very, in my opinion, fearful. They didn't like change. They didn't like to move from what was utterly and completely familiar to them. They liked safety, and they were very, very skittish. So they told me that when they were little girls, they saw this movie, I think called I Know What You Did, and Joan Crawford was in it. And in I Know What You Did, these two teenage girls call up people randomly on the phone. They say, I know who you are. I know what you did. And it so happens that one of them, they call this man who was like 30, but allegedly sleeping with 90-year-old Joan Crawford. And she was mad. And this, and then there ended up being murders. But in any event, Joan Crawford, for those of you who haven't seen her, she's very severe looking. She was tall. She had like these really thick eyebrows, this really hard looking face. And she was like, she stomped around, and she had a loud voice. And my friends, these cousins of my ex, said that they saw Joan Crawford in this movie and they were afraid of her ever since. Mommy dears came out. They were terrified. Even they would just uttering the name Joan Crawford like made their heart stops, even as adults. And I've got to say, like, Joan Crawford is vaguely terrifying. So it was something that stuck with them for the rest of their lives. But, the fearfulness, I wonder to the extent to which you all think Joan Crawford is scary. And Jessica and anyone else, Kim, if anyone else is out there, let me know. 2, do you think that the fear of these sort of supernatural, unrealistic unknowns is tied to a general squirreliness or fearfulness around the future or other things out there?
I've never I guess I'm different. I can watch slasher films all night long and I can get some really, really, really good sleep. But if I watch something that has just like a kernel of believability to it, to where it could really happen, that's what kind of freaks me out. Like, I'm probably going to tell my age here. But I'm going to go with reruns. I'll just say it's reruns. So I'm not going to do that. But I like Miami Vice, the old school Don Johnson Miami Vice episodes. There was is
that the 70s?
80s, mid 80s. But I was being born around the time. I watched it came out on DVD. But there was one episode where Don Johnson comes home and there's a hitman in his living room. And the lights are all dim and everything. And all he does is he spots like a donut and a cup of coffee. And he's like, wait a minute, that wasn't here before. And he automatically, is on high alert. That scares me to death. But for whatever reason, Freddy Krueger running through my house chasing me doesn't scare me. I don't know.
To me, another one.
That's
He terrified me.
Yeah, I think it's just that little, like I said, that kernel of reality that could happen is what kind of gets me a little bit.
Did any of you have this game when you were younger? So when I was living in Russia, we used to have this game called Pikavaya Dama, and essentially a translation is Queen of Spades. And what that game was in the dark, you would have typically it was either chalk or soap, and you would draw these stairs. You would draw a stairwell on a mirror. Oftentimes, you would draw a stairwell. And then you would draw a doorway, and the whole time you're drawing it, you're saying the name. You're almost calling that thing to come out.
Oh.
And essentially, part of that game was that when you started, from the time that you started drawing, the challenge was that you wouldn't be able to finish the whole thing, and that is, you wouldn't be able to finish drawing the door because that thing would come. And I know for me, I was terrified of it. I couldn't even get to the first step because I was so afraid of the unknown to become known. It's just like you don't know how you watch these stories and you read these books, and I don't know how much the two of you or Jessica or anyone else believe in this, but I do believe to a degree like energy does exist in the form of a spirit. Like you hear those stories where the person passes or there was a murder in the house and like that house is haunted, and you see all these signs of paranormal activity, and that was just one of the stories that I couldn't do it. I couldn't even be in the same room when the thing, Bloody Mary,
like Candyman.
Latasha, welcome back.
When
we have missed you.
When that was happening, but I was just curious if like any of you have played that game before, including Latasha.
So Latasha hasn't been here for a while. I do want to welcome home those that we love and who we always miss. But isn't it kind of the same as Candyman?
I was gonna say Candyman, yeah.
What is that game?
Say Candyman in the mirror 5 times, and yeah, it's new movie just came out. Very good. Go check it out if you just but yeah, I do believe in the energy piece. I went to the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, based off The Shining.
Oh, really?
And I'm not going to tell you what happened to me there because I'm going to look like a nutcase on here, but I went there to visit. I was down there TDY, and I was in Denver, and I said, you know what? I'm going to drive up to the Stanley Hotel and go see what it's all about. Being a huge horror fan, and I go to the Stanley Hotel, and I did the tour. Let's just say something happened, and I blamed somebody that was on the tour thinking they were messing with me. And they were like, man, I ain't even got anywhere near you. And I said, all right, I'm getting out of here. And I left that night, drove back, and I felt really weird. It was the energy was just off altogether. But yeah, that was my story. I don't care what anybody says. I felt like something.
Can you share what happened? Because that's quite the cliffhanger.
Yeah, it was just someone kept hitting me, and then someone was pulling on the hair on my arm. And I was like, what? This girl better leave me alone. And we were in like a little circle. And I finally got to the point, I was trying to be a little, polite. And I was like, I'm not going to say nothing. And then finally I kind of just got on her. And then I went up to she's like, dude, I haven't touched you. Stop flattering yourself. I'm not messing with you. And I went up to the tour guide and I was like, someone else was complaining about getting the hair on their arms pulled. And the tour guide's like, oh, let me write this down. This is like the 12th one we've had this week. This keeps happening. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, yeah, I've got this book. Like every week I have like 30 reports of people who someone's pinching them or getting the hair pulled on their arm. And it's always on this floor. And I was like, I'm out, and drove back to my hotel and flew out the next day. And
Jessica seems to have a similar experience, and I will leave Oleg to put that up on the screen for folks to share. I'm jealous. I've always wanted some supernatural stuff to happen to me. It's very disappointing. I've never had it. I've always wanted to have a ghost or some sort of sighting. I've wanted to go into a seance and have some weird stuff occur. 2020, this television magazine had a show when I was in law school about a demonic possession. Now, this demon was very polite. When the possessed girl, for instance, wanted to do her Linda Blair vomit, she politely grabbed a bucket and vomited in it. And so it was nice to know that the demon was concerned about the carpet. But I was like, how come none of this stuff ever happens around me? I want a little bit more of the unknown in my life. I want some excitement and jazz, especially I've had enough unknown with unpredictable bosses and crazy job situations and not knowing whether I'm going to have revenue for my business the next day. That sort of unknown I do get afraid of, I'll confess. But how come none of the good stuff unknown ever happens to me.
Someone fetch you a demon.
Do you either of you ever fear the fact that, like, when you go into, let's say, a haunted house or a situation where there's these paranormal activity or spirits, whichever way you want to label it, that you might be haunted forever? Is that a conscious thought on any of your minds? Because I know for me, that's the reason why I don't go.
Oh,
It's exactly because of that.
So I lived in Europe for 6 years. We sought out haunted houses, cemeteries. Like
Oh boy.
yeah. I mean, even my daughter is like, oh, I want to go here. Let's go check out this. There was a massacre that happened there, and yeah, I don't know if some spirit attached to me. I mean, as long as they're a good spirit, I'm cool. But if they're gonna come in here and bite me and mess with the lights when I'm sleeping or turn the television, we're gonna have a problem. And then you get an exorcist. You do the whole exorcism. But yeah, I would invite a nice spirit, I guess. Give me Casper, someone like Casper.
Jessica invited me over to her house so I could finally get some hauntings.
She's in Alabama.
Yeah, I've got some well, all of them are dead. I have some relatives there, but I was going to say, if they're all dead, maybe they can haunt me. Maybe they can provide some. In New York City, we have the unknown.
Ghostbusters.
I will say there was a weird incident, and I may have shared it on this show before. I'm not sure if I have or not. And it was an unknown, weird, bizarre thing of a different sort. So, and if I have said this story before, Oleg in particular, I believe you would have been the one to hear it. So have patience with me.
Don't worry, I'll just log out and log back in.
Yeah, you just roll your eyes. I'll maybe change the ending so there's some unknown in it for you.
Yes,
okay,
please.
I hope you're happy.
Please.
So I live near Central Park. I used to go walking in Central Park at night during the heart of the pandemic just to get away because I don't like the sun on my skin. Got to do something to keep my 26-year-old self vibrant and young. And so I was walking. There's this bridge in Central Park, and you cross it and you go into this forested area called the Rambles. And there's all sorts of weird paths, and there are some unknown things that go on in there I don't want to know about. And they're not hauntings either. And in any event, when I crossed the bridge and began to enter into the pathways that lead you into this forested area, and there are hills and things like that, I saw this hunched black figure at the crossroads. It looked like a pillar or a human being without a head, but the shoulders were all like this, and it was just silent. And there was a cape. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Mimic about the gigantic roaches that eat people, but it sort of looked like the gigantic humanoid roaches in Mimic. It was
Sounds
very
like
Voldemort, only without the head.
Mm.
And so I was like looking at this, trying to figure out, why is this weird human-like pillar in the middle of a pathway at night in Central Park in the forest? And then all of a sudden I realized it was a human because the head lifted itself and the arms spread out. And then at the feet, there was a whole circle of rats. And all of the rats just suddenly scattered into the nearby forest. And then this man just ran away up one of the paths. It was something that I went and told my husband about that night. I was very disturbed by it. Well, first of all, I didn't continue walking into the Ramble. I said, I don't need to be walking in Central Park in the middle of the night anymore. And I turned around and I crossed the bridge back where I came from and went home. I have not walked in Central Park at night again.
Wow. Is this a true story? Did this really happen?
It did. Life? It's not made up at all. It was very weird. And Central Park is not some crime-ridden place, but that was just weird enough. There was enough of an unknown capacity that I was like, as much as I want hauntings, as much as I want to take Jessica up on her offer to visit, and to give me a whale experience and all those other sorts of things that I don't have anywhere else, actually living it was something I don't need to ever do.
Wow.
And what was unknown about it, why it was disturbing, was that it was vaguely threatening, but I didn't understand why. The idea of this pillar suddenly coming to life and being a human was threatening. That's not the way things are supposed to be. Having a circle of rats surrounding a human being in the dark in the middle of Central Park. That's just weird. Rats are threatening. They're vectors of disease. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Not that we catch COVID from rats, but nevertheless, I associate them with disease. I associate them with infestations. I certainly don't associate them with being around human beings, let alone in a circle at their feet.
Mm-hmm.
And it bothered me. It was threatening to know that there was this person in the middle of Central Park that was dark. Yes, Richard Marks, who is a fellow New Yorker who has not been here for a while. And Richard, it is so good to see you. Yes, rats. And they weren't little shrimpy rats. And no, they were not mice. They were rats. And it was disturbing. Not only did I not understand what I was seeing, so it was unknown there, I didn't understand the meaning of it. I didn't understand what was going on. The unknown about what might happen to me was a person that sits there in a cape hunched over in the middle of Central Park's rambles, surrounded by rats, going to turn around and do some crazy things.
Reminds me of a movie from Home Alone where
Were there rats in Home Alone?
No, there wasn't rats. It was the pigeons.
It was the pigeon lady. She was in Central
Pigeons
Park.
are rats
Was it
with wings.
The first or the second one? Where
it was the second one.
So he runs into Central Park and there's this lady, and she's, I don't know, the bird lady, the pigeon lady. And
she ends up being really nice.
She literally just like calls, I don't know, puts out, I don't even remember how she was able to attract so many pigeons. I mean, probably with seeds, but like.
I think she had the little seeds in her hand. Yeah.
But it reminded me of that theme. Obviously, different creature, but at the same time, it's the same exact thing. But I'm curious, as the three of us were sharing a lot of this in regard to the initial question of, are you comfortable with the unknown? I'm really curious to hear your perspectives on what actually contributes to that. So sounds like in many of our cases, familiarity plays a big role. Whether or not you're familiar with the circumstances or not determines whether or not you're going to be comfortable with the unknown. Now, I understand that as it comes to, let's say, circumstances that you can see on a daily basis. But what about just life in general? I mean, so much about life is unknown and unpredictable. So how do you develop that sense of predictability and familiarity at the same time?
Well, how do we even deal with it? Because, and actually, I think that this is an interesting topic for Bodhi, and that perhaps can speak to us in a way that most people can't. Jessica does mention self-confidence. I assume, Jessica, but I would love to hear your thoughts about this, that we have the self-confidence that whatever might come our way that we can face. Self-confidence, though, I wonder if also either overridden by or working in concert with habit. When I think about it, what makes us so certain that when we wake up every morning, the unknown is going to happen? Every new day that we wake up, every passing second in the future that we enter into is the unknown. We never know what's going to happen the next second.
Or even the next breath. What makes us so certain that we'll be able to create, process, and, I don't know, somehow reproduce the following breath after that?
I think we're creatures of habit, and we like to be in control. And anytime I come on to do something like this, I do my little bit of research, and some of the big things that contribute to our anxiety being built up of that unknown is habit, control, pressure, intuition, and experience. And I think that experience is probably one of the biggest things that contribute to it. If we've had something happen in the past, just like we were talking about the animals when we started this, someone may have been attacked by a dog. They go run down a road. What do they feel fearful of? There may not be a dog anywhere around there. It's that unknown. Is one going to come running out? And I think on just a day-to-day, like personal life, it's that, there's nothing certain but the uncertain, and not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. Like, I didn't know how it was going to go logging on here and doing this podcast with y'all. I had no idea how it was going to go. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing as soon as I log off from here. But I think with that habit, that control, I feel like I'm still going to be in control. I think that helps. But I think the thing that really fears us is outside of experience, I think control. I think if we go to a new job, if we, if there's something financially going on, if people watch politics, you can't control that to an extent. It's out of your control. That scares people. That leads to that fear. But I think experience, intuition, habit, pressure, and control are the main driving forces of what causes some of that uncertainty in our minds.
Tripp, the minute you joined the Air Force, you were escalating the stakes of the unknown that you face.
Yeah.
And those who are like frontline soldiers, the grunts, so to speak. I don't know if that's a term that's offensive or not. And if it is, I apologize. But the people who are really like out there, the first ones called if there's a situation to be there where there are explosions and things, like the podcast guest I had not that long ago, who was one of the IED
it's a lot of it,
right, dismantlers. Unknown is a lot more dangerous and scary but concrete than a vampire kid scratching at the window at night.
Yeah.
And so and there is, it's impossible to control that. Do you have any thoughts, just based on what you know, people you've talked to, your own experience, about how people come to terms with dealing with that? And then especially Jessica is saying a couple of things that are interesting. As we know from her comment a few minutes ago, self-confidence is out there. To what extent can one maintain self-confidence in the face of true unknowns? With high degrees of variability and high degrees of stakes with regard to the outcome, like in a war situation.
Risk.
And then the truism that Jessica also points to, which is that the only known is the unknown. But is that something that we can really accept, particularly at that level, to the extent that you can answer that?
I like the self-confidence piece that she was talking about. And once you've been through something like, even in the military, like basic training, I went off to basic training. You talk about unknown. I was waiting tables at Red Lobster, and I was told you're going to be flying to San Antonio and going to basic training. I knew nothing about it. I didn't do as much research as I probably should have, because I kind of wanted to get that full experience. And I get there, and you talk about unknown. That was everything. The way I've been living my life for 27 previous years was nothing like what I experienced. But you tend to overcome it. And when you overcome it, it's almost like you surprise yourself and you build up that self-confidence. And you're ready to tackle, anything else that's put in front of you, such as a deployment. You get a deployment, you have a little bit more of that unknown. You see what it's about. You understand it. You thrive in it. You build up that self-confidence, and you'll have to excuse my dogs. They don't know I'm recording. I think just over time, I think that we build up our confidence with it. And someone told me one time, and I love the quote, get comfortable being uncomfortable and tackle those opportunities that you have no idea what they look like, because you're stepping outside of your comfort zone. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to like it. It's not your norm. But you thrive, you succeed, and you build up more confidence in the long run.
As a practical matter, though, how do you do that?
You just have to just embrace it, really. I've learned to live by that. I have. I'll tell y'all this. I believe it or not, this may come to a surprise, and y'all both know I like to talk. I used to be a horrible public speaker. I used to be so afraid of public speaking. I couldn't talk in front of two people, and I had to get up and speak in front of my squadron, and I totally butchered it. It went about as bad as it could go. I got offered a job to be an instructor, which is what I currently do. And I remember going to a graduation a couple of days later, and I saw one of the instructors on stage talking in front of 300 people. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's going to be me talking in front of 300 people. There's no way I can do this. And in my head, I'm painting this narrative of me failing in front of that many people. And I almost turned down the job. I did. And I have no idea what my life would have looked like if I would have done that. But I had a mentor that said, get comfortable being uncomfortable, take this position. You're going to start seeing that when you take advantage of opportunities like this, instead of running from them, if you run towards them, you'll succeed. And First time I had to get up and speak in front of people, I had that same story replaying in my head of me crashing and burning. But over time, I got better at it to where now it's hard. You'd be hard pressed to get me in front of a group of people that I'm not nervous standing up there talking in front of, because I learned to overcome that. And it's not something that I think you can read a book and go out and conquer right off the bat. I think it's something that just time, experience, maturity, I think plays a lot with it too. And not letting people get in your head, and you just understanding your self-worth and self-value and what you can do. You can surprise yourself with what you're able to do by embracing that unknown.
Isn't there a difference though between embracing this concept, and Bodhi, this is more of a question to you and maybe to you as well, Scott, if you can relate, but isn't there a difference between embracing the unknown, let's say of public speaking, and not knowing how certain things are going to turn out, compared to possibly losing your life when you go on tour? And if so, like, what is that difference, and how do you personally process that? Because I certainly can't relate to the second one, because I don't actively put myself in situations, nor do I have events like that in my day-to-day that are going to put me in a position where I'm going to have to possibly lose a life. But that's not even true. Like, car wrecks, things like that happen, but you are making a conscious choice to put yourself in those situations. So like, what is that difference in the unknown between knowing that today might be your last compared to that fear of public speaking?
Yeah, to some people, that fear of public speaking is that it could be your last day.
And in some professions, it could be.
Yeah, it really could. But in terms of like a wartime scenario, I've been very fortunate to where I haven't been in that sort of situation. My one deployment was to Cyprus. I was on a beach working some comm stuff, so I was pretty fortunate with that. But I can't imagine. I don't know if it's adrenaline or what it is, but I mean, you hear stories, and especially if you read like a lot of World War II, Vietnam books, and journals that people have written, and just what was going through their head. I can't even imagine. I can't even put myself in those situations. I think the stakes, the highest stakes that I've probably been in is, like I said, getting up talking in front of a large group of people. Or like you said, you get in a wreck, or you're in a unfamiliar neighborhood or something like that. I think those are probably the riskiest scenarios I've ever been in. But yeah, I can't even imagine, like I think back of like those, heroes that were out there on the shores of Normandy, like what was going through their mind as they were landing. I can't even begin to fathom that.
And that's a conscious choice they're making, being able to do that. Like for me, I'm more so, car wrecks and things like that. Like, and Scott, I don't know, I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well. But those are things, at least based on my experience. Yes, I've embraced those things as possibilities, but I don't actively prepare for it. I don't consciously wake up every day and thinking, okay, today this might happen. How am I going to deal with it? But the reason why I asked the worst scenario is because that is a thought. I mean, that's probably the speech at the beginning prior to departure to wherever, that, hey, today literally might be the last hour. And so, like, how do you process that compared to an everyday civilian life where I personally don't register? I know the risk, but I don't consciously think that, okay, I'm going to get in the car, I'm going to drive to the grocery store, and this is going to happen, and what should I be doing before?
I'll throw out some conversation starters about this, pointing out that Jessica, also of all people, says that she dropped out of speech in college. And my favorite organization, Toastmasters, has made an international presence out of the fact that people are afraid of it. And there is data out there, exactly as you were saying, Tripp, that people are actually more afraid of public speaking than death, even though, as the National Speakers Association says, no one has ever actually died from public speaking.
You remember the Jerry Seinfeld line?
No,
more people would actually be reading. They would rather be in the casket than reading the eulogy.
Yeah.
Now, I want to point out some things. Actually, the Normandy conversation back and forth was an interesting one, because there was a slight, and I know what you were getting at, Oleg, there was a slight factual error in what you said, and there's some significance to that, because it actually that error makes or it was a lack of clarity, I should say. It really
Mhm.
actually does raise something, which is they did not do that voluntarily. They were drafted. And
Mhm.
so what you have is people who were being involuntarily put into a situation where they were nonetheless required to charge forward, putting their lives at risk and understanding full well that they may die. And that's actually a different scenario than, to me, I suspect, than where you volunteer. But I will say this about the all volunteer situation and why I think it's so significant. But this is just me talking.
Mhm.
It could be all volunteer armies have occurred during phases of the United States' history in which we have either been in peacetime or the needs of the military for the engagements that we're in have not been such that the all volunteer army can't fill it without raising an overwhelming degree of public protest. And so and also our culture is in a different place, and we can comment about that for a whole other hour and a half around the necessity of the shared sacrifice that a draft brings or a shared national service brings into the world. A mutual friend of all of ours, Joe Bogdan, has a podcast episode on my show that's coming out tomorrow, I think, that actually includes a lengthy discussion about sacrifice and how that helps build culture and cohesion and what that means from a whole host of perspectives that relate to what we're talking about. So the reason why I mentioned the latter situation is that it would be easier, one might imagine, to, in peacetime, say, well, the chances are that I'm not going to die.
Mhm.
Or in situations where the United States' military prowess in comparison to the enemy is such, again, its human resource needs are very limited. And so the chances that you are going to die, while not insignificant, particularly if you get the wrong deployment, it's still not at the same scale of World War II or or Vietnam, the draft era places where U.S. casualties were monstrous. And the people that were drafted, by the way, didn't always, there was no guarantee. You could be smart as heck, you could take whatever tests there were, it didn't matter. You still could end up on the front lines in some jungle somewhere or on some beach, just ready to get blasted away by an army, particularly during World War II, where for all we knew, they could easily overpower us, as they
But
had
the,
every other power.
but that begs another question though, in regard to, and this is more so I think to comfort and how we develop comfort, and or whether or not it is even comfort to begin with, or if there's something else. I mean, look at look at an event that you were somewhat a part of, Scott. 9/11, right?
Yeah.
That took place, and I mean, I can't speak from experience, nor do I not. I don't truly know that much about it, but I'm sure that the New York, as well as the country, as well as other parts of the world, were in shock and in trauma for however long after that event took place. But however many years later, we still go into buildings, and that's where I guess for me it's more so a question of like, is it really comfort with the unknown that we've developed,
Or is it
or is
denial?
or is it denial that there's no way it could happen again? There's no way it could happen to me. And that's where I get curious with some of these events, that yes, we remember it every single time 9/11 comes around on a calendar year, but what about the other days? What gives us that whatever? Is it courage to step into a building again? I mean, there are certainly buildings just as high in other cities, Austin, Boston, San Diego. I mean, there are plenty of skyscrapers that can, maybe not the same height, but like relatively high. And so every time you make it to the top floor, like what is that's where I just get more curious than anything. It's like, what is that then? How do we get to that point in knowing that all these events happen and they could happen at any given moment?
I
Is that really comfort?
I think if you look, I think we're definitely, when us as a society are uncomfortable, is when a lot of these uncertainties arise. If you look through like historical times, um, I mean, you got Vietnam, you've got Cuban Missile Crisis, you've got uh, AIDS when AIDS first became a thing. You've got 9/11, Wall Street, and then most recently COVID.
COVID.
If you look at all of those situations, there was a lot of uncertainty surrounding those to everyone in society. I mean, you look at COVID recently, last year, what happened if you were standing next to somebody in a store and they went like,
Yeah.
and you automatically kind of freaked out. You were uncomfortable around them. And then if they coughed again, you've got to get out of here. You've got COVID. I'm going to catch it. We weren't comfortable. And also we weren't, if you look at any of those as well, a lot of times we were so uncertain as to why things were happening the way we were uneducated. Not to say that like in a demeaning way, but we were uneducated as to what was happening still. I mean, even with the COVID vaccination, I know that is a sensitive topic to talk about with some people, but a lot of people, they don't know what they don't know. And that scares people. And
I mean,
think
let's face it, we also don't know what we don't know.
we don't.
We haven't.
We don't. And that's why I think that the fact that like us as a society, nobody really knows like, the vaccinations, how long they're good for, the boosters, any of that stuff. But you talk to people and you got people on both sides who are telling you, I'm right. And that scares people because they want to know an answer. They want to know, dating back to 9/11, why did this happen? How do we prevent this from happening again? Everything that happened on Wall Street, was it 2008? Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, how do I keep this from happening again? I don't want to lose all my money that I've invested. And it's a lot of things that we get scared of. We don't, and especially if it affects our livelihood. I think that's where we tend to get really, really uncomfortable with it. Mm-hmm. Searching for answers.
Well, I also find it fascinating, and one of the things that I was having a conversation recently with a friend of mine, and we were talking about one of the opportunities that people have noticed within the particular time frame that we're in, and that's real estate. To be able to buy real estate, to be able to capitalize off of those opportunities. Well, in some cities, it's for sure an advantageous move. In others, not so much. You look at places like Flint, Michigan, for example, Detroit. The housing, however many years ago, might have been something that was relatively cheap and relatively quick to be able to flip. But as people started to move out of those cities, it became a lot more challenging because now you're in neighborhoods where there are tremendous vacancies, and those vacancies oftentimes aren't cared for. And so I think it raises another question as far as the unknown. And that's a lot of the risks that many of us take. I mean, buying an investment of a house, thinking that somehow in the future it's going to profit. And what if it doesn't? What if you happen to be in a city that it literally goes the other way? Everyone moves out. No one wants to live there. The pandemic affects it so badly. Going back to the Flint crisis, water. They don't have clean water. And that will impact the price of your house.
I want to say hi to Nina. Tell your mom that when people are coughing in the gym here in New York City, they get side-eyed. Now, they have very, very strict vaccination and mask requirements here in the grocery stores, and people take it seriously, so that doesn't happen as much. But in other places, even where there are vaccines required to attend the place or to be in that location, people still, it's almost a habit now.
Do you get a fine if you don't wear a mask at the grocery stores there?
That I don't know, but make no mistake, a lot of these owners will kick your ass out.
Oh, wow.
Excuse me. Maybe I shouldn't have used that.
Just come to Alabama, and we don't wear them down here.
Yeah, I love New York. So this raises something that I would love to hear both you, Trip, and Oleg's thought about, as well as anyone watching and commenting, which is the limits of our ability to be rational creatures. Perhaps that explains how and why we can become comfortable with the unknown. Oleg, I responded to, and I still have this in me, to 9/11 by being hyper vigilant in certain places. And I react very quickly if I sense a threat like that ever again. And that's been 20 years ago. I don't care. I hear a plane too low, or I hear something that reminds me, a sound that reminds me of that. I'm ready to go, or ready to move, or ready to take whatever defensive action that I need to take. And now I was gotten calm, immediately afterwards. Any boom was like would wake me up out of my sleep. I'm not like that anymore. But it's one of those things where you become aware of that fact that everything is tenuous when that occurs. But is that really rational? Perhaps what becoming uncomfortable with the unknown is leaving the rational behind. You mentioned real estate investing, entrepreneurship. All of those things are things, and perhaps even joining the military. I can't speak as to that, but perhaps those are situations where the unknown and the real risks may be greater than our minds are prepared to accept. And so we make decisions based on things like hope. Hope, perhaps, is what makes us comfortable with the unknown. And it goes as to one of my favorite questions and my favorite conundrums, which is whether hope is a blessing or a curse, whether hope is a virtue or one of the most grave horrors ever visited upon humanity.
Bodhi?
I like that. That's pretty deep about hope. Yeah. Yeah, honestly, with that, I do think hope is a blessing. I think more than a curse. I think so. I think hope allows us to overcome some of those uncertainties. And whether it's, religious beliefs, whether it's just previous experience, whether it's just optimistic, I think that hope definitely plays a part in that. Yeah. I was over here like I was really comprehending what you said with that quote on my end.
So, and Oleg has heard me say this before. I'll sort of give some background why I think about that a lot. I'm obsessed with Greek mythology, as people who know me are about to find out in much more detail in the future. But we'll leave that conversation for another day. And there's a story of Pandora's box, right? The golden age of humanity was there until Pandora was sent down by the gods to punish humanity for discovering fire. And she had this jar. It really wasn't a box. It was a jar. And she was told to never open it no matter what. But the gods also gave her, among her many other characteristics, they gave her the characteristic of curiosity. So she didn't do anything with it for a while, but then eventually she couldn't help it. She opened the jar, and out came all of the ills and evils and plagues and suffering that humanity has to this day. She realized, oh my God, what a horrible thing I've done. So she shut the jar's lid, but it was too late. Everything had gotten out except one thing, which was hope. And so the metaphorical question is, what is the meaning of that story? The story of Pandora's box is one of the most famous stories in the history of humanity. Everyone knows it, or has at least heard of it. But what does it really mean? Why does it resonate? When she shut the jar, hope didn't escape. So was it that she preserved hope? Or was it that hope was one of the evils sent by the god to torment and plague? And so by her keeping hope locked in that jar, it never really, at least to the Greek mind, infected us to the same extent that all of these other things did.
So I think it's an and. I think it's a blessing and a curse. I don't think it's an or. And here's why I think that to be true. First, in looking at it from a more, I guess you could say, positive perspective, hope for me has done tremendous wonders throughout my life. It has helped me take the necessary step when I was the most afraid. It has helped me get into fields that I didn't think I could be in due to listening to opinions and perspectives of other people, their limiting beliefs, their fears, the areas of you can't be an entrepreneur because when you look at the statistics, I mean, what, 9 out of 10 businesses quote unquote fail or close by year 3 or 5, or whatever the statistic is. Two of you know that better than I do. So that's one thing. The fear of public speaking, and not necessarily public speaking just for the sake of public speaking, but public speaking as a profession. That's a whole other ball game to get into.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of hope that I find plays a role in helping me to evolve and progress within that particular field. The curse element of it, and I find that fascinating that you brought up that example, Scott, because at first it made me think that at the end of the day, maybe that's what is left. Maybe that is the key ingredient to being alive, and that's to
Mhm.
be able to maintain hope. Because without
Mhm.
hope, there is no inspiration, there's no motivation to keep going. There is no opportunity for the future.
Yeah.
There's not even opportunity for the now or opportunity to learn from the past. Without hope, there's no reason. What is the reason to keep going? The curse element is this, and this is how I've understood it through my own experience. It is that some of the events that I have been a part of, too much hope gave me a false sense of confidence and gave me a false sense of ability. And I have found myself in many of those situations, and I don't know if the two of you can relate, but where too much hope leading to too much false self confidence and false sense of ability
Yeah.
actually were more detrimental than they were beneficial.
False sense of hope. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when I was able to take a step back, for example, getting on that stage for the first time and thinking that I have learned X, Y, and Z things and I have gained the lived experience, only to realize that, man, I have so much more to learn. I don't know what it's like to live in another part of the world, and yet I'm sharing a perspective that's supposedly gives me the authority to do so. Or even, and I joke, I joke about this with Scott quite a bit. The whole concept of using we. We need to do this. We should all take X, Y, and Z. We should all get vaccinated. If I really look at that, who am I to say that we all need to do that?
Yeah.
I haven't walked a single step in your shoes. I haven't walked a single step in Jessica's shoes. I haven't walked a single step in anyone else's shoes but mine. Therefore, how can I really know that that is the necessary step that you have to take according to my lens? So that's why I think it's an and not an
Yeah.
or. I think that there are tremendous value and benefits that I receive from subscribing to that sense of hope, but I also try and understand that there's also the other side to that, and that sometimes hope can lead me down paths that I may not want to go down on, only if I take the time and really process. I don't know if the two of you can relate to times, but I haven't had direct experience like that, but I have had quite a few friends that been in situations like this when drugs when drugs entered our lives. I'll speak from my experience and some of the friends. And one of the things that I've noticed as far as some of the people that were surrounding me is that there was this sense of hope that, hey, I only had one beer, or I only had one of this or one of that. I can make it back home just fine. It's just
Mhm.
a couple mile, or some people would say it's just down dirt roads. Well, down dirt roads like what? 2 miles? 20 miles? How many cars do you pass along the way? How many houses can you possibly crash in? What is the road like? Yes, you said it's a dirt road. I mean, is it constant curves? What's the speed limit? So there's so many things that are unknown about that journey. And I found that to be interesting because in many of those situations, when I would have conversations with people, the most common factor that I noticed amongst all of them was hope. Hope that they were going to make it to the final destination. And yet, some of those situations that I saw, if I was in their shoes, I wouldn't even think about getting behind the wheel. So what gives him that? What gives him that hope? Is it the experience of the fact that they were able to do it, in complete sobriety 24 hours before? But yet the circumstances are different. So that's how I personally process it. I think for me it really is an and not either or.
Yeah, I'm like processing this hope topic really got my wheels turning a lot. Both of y'all have like really sparked something in me with this. You hear a false sense of hope, and I get where y'all are coming from. I'm trying to formulate some like follow-up question as to what I'm thinking, but you hear like, a false sense of hope, and it's often associated with, some sort of failure or you were unsuccessful at something. But I've lived through false senses of hope before, to where you have this picture of something and then it's not really what you imagined. And you did have your hopes up. I'm trying not to use that word 500 times, but I've started to, and I don't know if it's just because of life experiences and going through loss and going through death and going through all these things, but I read something and it kind of ties in with hope. I actually read it in very good book. I'm not a big autobiography guy, but Val Kilmer, I'm Your Huckleberry, has a line in there that says, the universe's rejection is sometimes the universe's protection. And I've got kind of this mentality now of when I have that false sense of hope and it doesn't go my way, there is some lesson to be learned there and something to take away from it. And that's hope in a way. So it's just this whole, like I said, this whole hope thing has really got me thinking here, to where I think Ola brings up a good point. It's not a good thing or necessarily a bad thing. It's either or. It's just kind of how you perceive it at the time.
And Jessica actually really made a good point from the Dollar General store, which, on the subject of hope, I hope you get some good stuff there, Jessica, if you're going into the Dollar General store. We don't have those in New York City. So whenever we go to a town where they have them, I like to pop in and see what's there where I can get for $1. The only thing you can get for $1 here is something in Times Square that I won't talk about. It's not even in Times Square anymore. But do they have that for $1 in Alabama? Okay, we'll change the topic. I don't know what's in me tonight. I think maybe it's that this challenge has come up and it really is a tough topic.
I wondered to not to interrupt you, Scott, but
You interrupted me.
I do wonder to what degree are some of these things, like Bodhi mentioned. I've definitely been in situations like that. I don't know if you have, Scott or Jessica or anyone else, but those moments right before when you are quote unquote about to start a relationship, and you Bodhi, you said it perfectly. You have your hopes up. Hopes about, man, we're gonna build a future, we're gonna get a house, we're gonna raise a family,
White
we're
picket
gonna get a
fences.
dog, we're gonna build a fence,
A
I'm
life
gonna paint
together.
it, we're gonna build a life together, and then all of a sudden the unknown happens, and that is life, and then boom, one dream after another, one aspiration after another just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I wonder to what degree is that really the hope that we carry within ourselves, and to what degree is it simply a projection of many, many generations that gets passed down, that this is what it is, and this is how you're supposed to be experiencing life, compared to our own interpretation of, this is what I hope to build by myself, this is what I hope to build with a partner. Like, how do you know that, Scott? Like, you're in a relationship like that, not like the one we described where there's a white picket fence or anything, but more so you're in a relationship that is, it's got to be somewhat built on hope. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Well, and that is the greatest fear. And it's the one thing that makes me sometimes think, did I make a mistake in being in a relationship? It sounds crazy, but there are moments where the unknown that someone like me would face is if something happened to my husband.
Mm-hmm.
That could happen at any moment. And the other unknown that's related to that is how I would live without him.
Yeah.
I sometimes don't know if I could.
But why do we think that? I mean, I get it. Like we've developed not we. I gotta stop using we. I've developed different attachments when it comes to a partner. I mean, a dog. I have definitely faced myself with that question. What would happen if Caleb were to pass X, Y, and Z number of hours or days? But I get curious, like, why do I think that? I know the attachment is so strong, but at the same time, if we're going back to what Bodhi had mentioned at the beginning, and that's experience does play a role within this concept of comfort, and especially comfort with the unknown. You were here before, you met him, you survived, you lived.
Yeah. So one thing related to that Jessica points to when she talks about the professional relationship that she had that changed is that there would be financial consequences, which would be pretty significant. And I although one can say, oh, that doesn't really matter, it actually really does. That's a lot of why people get married and stay together, because there are financial benefits to it. Leaving that aside, for me, it would be losing a part of my identity. It would actually be costing me my ability to function in a lot of ways. Our lives, the way our particular relationship has worked out, has been that we have our areas of sovereignty. And those are the things that the things that he rules, and there are the things that I rule. I haven't cooked a meal for myself in over 20 years. I do not know how.
Will you make one when I'm there?
No.
So you weren't kidding on your Instagram post. That was a real thing.
That's a real thing.
Well, I take back my laugh.
It's okay. It was an intended joke, so I'm glad that someone got it. Unlike some of my jokes today, I don't think people are getting, but that one you got, and I appreciate it. Or maybe they just weren't funny. My hope that people would laugh.
Out
but
the window.
Be that as it may, and so, but I think also it would take away a large part of my identity, and that's why at the end of the day, I also suspect that anytime a relationship ends, if it's one that is, and for me, that's how it's been when relationships have ended. They've taken away part of my identity. A part of me is gone. I had a long-term relationship before I was with David. That relationship ended not by my choice, to tell you that, and not in a way that I would have wanted. But when it was gone, I was devastated. I just, because a part of me was gone, and perhaps part of it was that lack of hope for the future of that relationship. I could hope all I wanted to, that I couldn't. Not even the most fantastical, delusional sort of hope that it could come back was something that I could wrap my mind around. I also had an unknown, which was, would anyone ever love me again?
Common thing.
Yeah.
I'm never going to find anybody to love me like that again. I'm never going to have that same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm too old. I'm too ugly. My quirks are too weird. I'm too this. I'm too that. All of these things are big unknowns. Death, what's most frightening about it is, in my opinion, the extinguishment of our identity. And the unknowns that can come with the separation of human companionship also implicate our identities.
The depth of an experience. I didn't even think about that until the two of you brought this up, with this whole concept that when an experience such as the one a relationship vanishes, it literally, I would much rather in the moment fix the thing, get it back, compared to, let's say, like get hit by a car or whatever it is. And that I find that to be fascinating. How like just my experience, having having gone through a fair share of heartbroken moments of my own, I will say that it's just like in the moment, that experience, I think for me, it was worse than dying.
They say like long-term relationships, it's like losing someone. Like they say a divorce is like a death because you're losing that part of you. I believe this is, relationships, family members, friends passing. I believe everyone copes with it differently. I know for me, I lost it's been well documented on here. I lost my father when I was 11 years old. I lost my sister. She was murdered when I was 16 years old. She was 14. And so for me, I remember both of those instances. I remember when I was notified about my dad and when I was notified about my sister. And I remember at that time, both times I remember sitting there thinking, what is my life going to look like now? Like that huge cloud of uncertainty just loomed over me at those moments. And I remember exactly where I was each time. And it was, wow, I'm never going to hear them again. I'm never going to see them again. I'm never going to do stuff with them. What in the world is my life going to look like? And it was going so fast paced. All these things that we've done together, it's never going to happen again. It's a huge uncertainty of how am I going to move on? How am I going to do this? To where now I get in, I can be in a relationship and my relationship cannot work out. And I'm like, I know now I'm going to move on. I know now I'm going to, I've been through it before. I've been through this loss. I understand life will continue to unfold in front of me. But I think it was unfortunately due to some of those experiences. But I think, just like going through a relationship, Jessica, I think, mentioned self-confidence earlier. Scott brought up a very valid point. Any of that stuff happens with relationships. It's, no one's ever going to like me. No one's ever going to find me funny. They're not going to find me attractive. I'm never going to get the same connection that I had with this person. But then what ultimately ends up happening? Like in Scott's case, you find somebody and you're like,
so much better.
So much better. Sometimes you can't see the hope. Sometimes that hope's there. You can't see it because your vision's clouded, but it's there.
Jessica, thank you for the most recent comments that you shared, both of them. Just leave them to be stated for what they are, because they kind of don't need a remark.
I wouldn't even know what to say if I was in your shoes, Bodhi. At that age, having to find that out in both set of circumstances, man, that's
yeah. And
how'd you process that? Like, I mean, do you remember?
Well, yeah, I had to be strong for my mom because I know my mom had tons of uncertainty, finances, where we were going to be living, how she was going to raise her kids. I mean, it really shook up my mom, especially when my father passed away. Both times we ended up having to move. And I mean, there was so much went into it. And then I couldn't, as a father, I couldn't even imagine losing a child. So everything she went through, it was, I remember, sulking and being upset and just being kind of out of it for like a week each time. But I remember I had to kind of, tighten up my bootstraps and, be there for her. And, we're there for each other, my mom and I. But, you just move on. You have hopefully when people go through situations like that, they have a strong support system and they can be that sense of hope. Friends, there's been things that have been going on in my life recently and in the past. And it's weird because sometimes people don't know that they're that little bright, shiny light of hope in your life. Yeah. And Scott, I think you actually had mentioned on, I'm plugging your Instagram story like crazy. You need to get some more followers listening to this, but
thank you.
You mentioned something about, like my friends are great. Yeah. It's true because your friends can be hope and they don't even know they're doing it. But yeah, that's what got me through a lot of that. Good support system. And my mom.
How do you, that brings up a really good question for either of you. How do you know when you're being that hope for someone?
You don't. Sometimes I think you do because people
Yeah.
will tell you, or
Yeah.
you're trying, at least in my case. Sometimes you don't.
Hmm.
You don't. Sometimes people may say or do something that may give you that, and you never know. They may even, there was someone, I don't remember the exact circumstance, but where I thank someone for giving me hope during a very dark point in their life, and they're like, oh, I don't even remember this whole conversation happening.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I was actually about to get out of the military. I had a bad experience, had bad leadership. I hate the term toxic leadership. I think that gets overplayed. But it was a different time. It was 2009. I was unfamiliar with all the different agencies that are out there and stuff to help people when they were really struggling. And I was about to get out, and I had one supervisor who invested in me, and he gave me a sense of hope. He was like, man, you got such a prosperous career if you just give this thing a chance and don't just base it off this experience you've had with these people. He does not even know to this day what he did for me. He's walking around and he may be saying to himself, I don't think I've impacted anybody. I don't think I've made a, dent on anyone's career, but I'm probably going to retire at 20 plus years. And he's going to be the person I'm up there thinking on the stage and may have no idea where he's at. But yeah, I think a lot of times we don't really know.
Have you thanked them already?
I did a while back, but the longer I've been in, the more thankful I've become for what he did for me.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And someone said on recent episode of the Shadows podcast, they said that, great leaders plant the seeds, but never are there long enough to really sit in the shade. And that's kind of how he was. He definitely planted those seeds, and he may never be able to sit under the shade and see exactly, what grew. But yeah, I think a lot of great leaders, sometimes you just don't know.
Jessica says that this show
profound.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Great leader. Say it again.
About the seeds?
Yeah.
Yeah, great leaders plant the seeds, but are never there long enough to see the shade. Sit under the shade, yeah.
And the read between the lines is death because they die?
Is what now?
Is the reading between the lines, is that because they pass?
You may do something so, you really never know the impact you have on someone until after the fact. It may be, I had someone message me on Facebook not too long ago, and they told me that they re-enlisted because of something I did. And I was like, I was just your teacher. I was just doing my job. But no, they were like, no, you connected with me. You were super relatable. You really took time to invest in me. And, it's scary to think, but they're like, I want to be like you. And hearing that, I was like, wow, I didn't even know. I had no idea and I'll tell you what, it made my day. It made my day 110%.
Yeah, beautiful. Wow.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Mr. Mason?
Jessica says that this show gives her hope that she can fall down the rabbit hole of thought and not die. And Jessica,
not yet.
Actually,
we haven't proved that thought.
Do it in Alabama, I'll save you.
Jessica, that's what this is all about. Facing the unknown of where our thoughts may lead us. Mm-hmm. Facing the unknown of what might come out of our mouths and other people may be illuminated by or may challenge us on. Facing the unknown of creating ourselves into something more and greater than we might have been through the process of thought, processing, and having conversation about it. I will say this, Oleg, and perhaps we want to talk about this before we close out. Mm-hmm. One place that gives more hope we can imagine is our sponsor, Spectrum Designs. Because as we've discussed before on this show, the unemployment rate for people on the autistic spectrum is unbelievably high, yet they give folks real, meaningful jobs, not just make work, but real jobs that impacts lives. And I was hoping that after we sign off and tell people where they can locate us and perhaps get some of the hope that we try to bring into the world, we can quickly play the advertisement about t-shirts and our own designs that
Mm-hmm.
Spectrum prints, because the t-shirts may not give me hope, but they do bring me joy. Oleg, where can people get hope from you and the lives that you touch?
For me personally, it's through overcoming odds. This is something that I've been conscious of creating for the past, I don't know, however many years by now.
4 years
Maybe
at
four,
least, right?
five, yeah, 4 years at least. And it's really this space where I intentionally try and process my own life and process my own challenges and obstacles. And I've noticed that over time, it's become really a collective movement of other people being able to be a part of it. And I will say that having been in this space for that many years, I do subscribe to this theory that we are stronger together. The only reason why I subscribe to that is because every set of circumstances is so different from anyone else's. And what it does for me, at least, is it gives me an opportunity to learn. That yes, I might not have experienced X, Y, and Z, but I can still learn from it. I might not have had certain situations happen in my life, like the two of you. I mean, enlisting, 9/11, but those are still conversations that I can learn from. So that's what I really try and focus on at this chapter of my life. And I know that the other thing that I'm trying to prepare myself for as far as the unknown goes is this trip that's literally happening in 15 days.
Yeah.
15 days, I'll be taking off from here to New York City to see Mr. Mason, um, where he will be making a homemade meal.
Me?
Just kidding. But afterwards, yeah, taking a trip to Lisbon, and then from there, starting with the El Camino, which would take me about 400 miles to hike to Spain. So, but I will say that in regard to this topic and in regard to the conversations that we host through overcoming odds and everything that I've learned is that unknown has truly become my best friend, and I have embraced it as an everyday component. I've embraced it through gratitude. I've really took it upon myself that whenever I feel grateful for someone, I make an effort to say it right there and there. And the two of you know this from experience.
Yeah, you're great at it.
And I just do it, and I don't take those things for granted. And Bodhi, that's why I even asked you that question, because when you're on that stage graduating, as the quote that you had mentioned, person may not be there. You don't know what circumstances, you don't know what life has in hand. So that's where I just try and encourage people that, hey, if you have to say thanks to someone for whatever you can acknowledge today, and that answer can always be better moving forward upon reflection, just say it, because most times they don't know. And the other part about that is they will never know unless you choose to say it. But that's for me, that's where I get a lot of my purpose from, my sense of identity, stepping out of the shadows, so to speak. But I also know that the two of you do similar things when it comes to purpose and understanding your shadows and the role that you play in this world. And Mr. Mason, I think you have a show of your own like that.
I do. But before I get into that, I do want to briefly acknowledge Jessica's excellent breakthrough show,
Hmm.
which is well worth hearing. Also, just want to point out that Jessica and Kim Schultz have agreed to be guest hosts on a future fan episode, and we're very, very excited about doing that next month. So more information about the dates of that will be forthcoming, but I think it's going to be a real highlight. And now with that, we will talk about my show, Scott Mason's Purpose Highway. It's at purposehighway.com. It is dealing with the cultural shifts in our society currently ongoing with regards to how we process the connection to each other through the search for meaning, exploring how purpose, spirituality, and ethics are changing as the historical institutions such as churches that have traditionally governed these areas are in decline, and how people are coming up with solutions to the secret plague of alienation that the dissolution of some of those, or the decline of some of those institutions, is bringing about in our society. Bodhi, you are kind of a podcast multipreneur. Talk to us about that.
We are getting busy over at the Shadows podcast. And, you know, I said earlier, nothing is certain
Well
but
put.
the uncertain. And also that we all have a shadow and we all have to step out of it. And we can all share our stories of obstacles, trials, tribulations we've had to overcome on the Shadows podcast, you know, theshadowspodcast.com. We have so many guests, from military to authors, entrepreneurs. Jessica mentioned Dee Wallace. She's actually going to be our Halloween guest.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So we're really excited. We got an awesome lineup of episodes coming up for October and the rest of September. But then also we've started a new series called Rise from the Shadows. And we're all superheroes. We've all been through some stuff. We've all got messages to share. And Scott Mason, I think, is joining us for our October slate of episodes. But it's basically the shadows last about an hour each, and the Rise from the Shadows are condensed. I mean, you can listen to them on your way to work. They're about 20 minutes, little TED Talks. Basically, people share something they've had to overcome in their life. You can feel the passion, and that's something, the feedback I got this past week is they listened to Shay Sparks. Y'all are both familiar with Shay.
Of course, she's wonderful.
And someone was like, one of my students actually came up to me and said, gosh, you can just hear the pain in her voice as she tells that story. And it's just so real and raw, and getting amazing feedback on Rise from the Shadows. So definitely go support us. Check us out on, you know, theshadowspodcast.com. And we got links to all of our social media sites. Go give us some love.
Now, let's see some t-shirts.
Before we do that, because I know we were going to conclude with it, one thing I just wanted to mention to anyone else that's listening right now and that I found value from this particular conversation is if people can, or if people would be willing to leave us a review on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you could find Just a Squirrel Looking for a Nut. That would help us quite a bit. Do you agree, Scott?
I do.
And with that said, let's see the t-shirts.
T-shirt. Yeah, let's show them.